This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the February 14th, 2017 edition of the DRF Players Podcast, show 229. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you virtually alongside, calling in from the planet Texas, at UT Big Air himself, the people's champion, Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
Oh, nothing much. Just getting ready for a fun weekend, and then it's off to Lexington one more time, and then there'll be Derby before we know it.
It's kind of amazing how quickly this spring is heading along. Happy to say we finally had some proper spring weather in New York this week, but I don't really know about that right now because I am not in the Brooklyn bunker. I'm actually in the world-famous Peabody Hotel, and I say that not to brag about my lush travel plans so much as I do to forgive in advance if we have a problem with our old friend Hotel Wi-Fi. It's been known to take down many an edition of the DRF Players Podcast, but we did some sound checking, and I'm hoping things are going to be A-OK. Going to finish up the show today and then drive out to Hot Springs. Our friend Steve Bick has provided an array of dining advice. Should be a very good time out there. Let me ask you, we actually, believe it or not, haven't talked about this off air. What do you recommend? Where should I be looking to hang out specifically at the track today? What would you recommend?
We sat with Marshall in the carousel, which I would imagine is not an easy seat to obtain on Apple Blossom and or Arkansas Derby Day, but that's where we sat. We didn't, like I said, I was there for like 5 races before I headed to the airport to head to Lexington. So I didn't get the full experience, just enough to check it off of the list.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to do that today. I noticed Marshall has a runner in a little bit later on. I know a certain 4-year-old girl who'd probably enjoy the opportunity to go into the paddock for the first time. That's not something we've ever done at Saratoga, actually. We're usually too stuck in the paddock bar to make it the few yards into the paddock proper. So maybe we'll get a chance to do that and see some friends. I heard a rumor that Travis Stone might be around in Hot Springs this weekend. You any truth to that? You know anything about that?
The word on the streets is he's around there somewhere. I haven't spoken to him directly, but I have heard that he is part of the groupie bandwagon with the wonderful Classic Empire. I don't mean that as a slight. I think he's just hanging out with his buddy Louisville native Norm, and I think they're just running around trying to take in the experience.
Travis has so many jobs. He's an excellent racing analyst, as his time this winter on Talking Horses proved, doing some terrific shows there with Andy Serling. He's also obviously a Grade 1 race caller. He's proven himself to be an adept morning line maker. Find better himself. I've seen him in action. He knows what he's doing at a betting window. Apparently we can add Norm Cassie bodyguard to Travis's list of professions.
Yeah, I guarantee he'll keep him safe. So if anyone's got wants to attack Norm because you're mad because Classic Empire knocked you out of the Pick 5, Travis will be there to put up the shield.
Let's put a pin in the Classic Empire talk. We will obviously going back there later today. We're going to talk about a few more races than we normally do. Some of them are going to be sort of quick run-throughs, and maybe we can look a little more in-depth at what I think is, from a betting point of view, a fascinating running of the Arkansas Derby in just a little bit. I want to get to some tournament talk, and we can start off with a tournament question. This one came in from Gilbert, and he asks, how do you reset? I started the year strong and then won a few more tournaments. Since then, I can't get my groove back. Thoughts on how to do just that. Jonathan, how do you deal with the inevitable streaks? And you've been known to have as many of them as any player. In fact, I'd say you're on a pretty good one now, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what about when you get in those ruts where you're not seeing the ball as well, where you're not having the success you had recently? How do you get your groove back?
I handicap harder, which seems to help me get out of those holes. I think sometimes we get into like a little bit of a kind of a comfort zone with when you're doing well and things are kind of coming to you. Next thing you know, you're feeling a little bit smarter than you really are, and you move a little bit swifter through the PPs than you probably should. I slow down a little bit, and in a situation where I think I've picked a horse that I want to, that I'm gonna pick, or I land on a horse I'm gonna pick, and I feel like I can get there without watching the replay. I go ahead and force myself to watch the replay just in case. If there's a horse that I'm pretty sure I want to toss, I force myself to watch the replay, and when I slow down and I dig a little bit deeper, I usually feel a little bit better about it. And if and when you don't do well, you'll at least feel like you did the work to get you to where you were.
I think that's a really great point about the dual benefits of doing the work. For one thing, you might notice something that obviously changes your opinion, but even if you don't, it's going to help your mental state to know that you weren't getting the worst of it, that you were in fact getting the best of it or close to it. I will say that there are certain streaks that are bad enough that a little bit of a pause before coming back at it with a more pronounced work ethic might be a good idea. There's nothing wrong with taking a weekend off or a couple of days off, whatever works for you to refresh. I've noticed my ROI in days after a brief freshening is very good from the record keeping I've done and just anecdotally as well. Is that something that you do from time to time? Do you ever pause or are you pretty much going to handicap whether or not you're gambling?
Well, I'm going to handicap just, with the show. Obviously, we're talking about racing, so I'm looking at racing, and I play in quite a bit of feeders during the week. My workload preparing for a feeder is a little bit different than it is on a Saturday or Sunday for a qualifier. I tend to move a little bit swifter during the week. However, when I do slow down a little bit, it does help me during the week. But, I think one of the other things that you can do that's really beneficial for trying to get out of a rut is to really take the time to not turn the page, but I recommend turning the page. I think that's something you got to get good at, is just moving on from a bad situation. But I do think that you can learn a lot about how you've made the mistakes that got you into the position you got into by doing some record keeping. So that's one of the things I definitely try to do.
Talk a little bit more about that record keeping angle. That's very interesting to me.
Yeah. So one of the things that I picked up doing some good record keeping during, on how I'm playing in tournaments was to figure out about just kind of how I do well in certain situations, and what situations I do well in, and like what situations I need to try to avoid.
I think that's wise. There's a lot of times you'll find a pattern that you can identify and realize that you don't need to, whatever that pattern happens to be, playing in a certain type of tournament or tournaments at a certain track or a certain strategy in certain tournaments. The more you can identify patterns in your own play. We talked about this idea before. It's not just handicapping horses. It's not just handicapping races. Sometimes your success comes down to your ability to handicap yourself, and that's something that I don't think enough people pay attention to. So hopefully those are a few ideas to help get back into the groove. One last thought on that before we move on, just to simplify a little bit. This is something I've spoken with extensively to Mike Maloney about, who's somebody who is typically playing the most. He's playing in a lot of different pools. A great vertical player, plays a lot of superfectas, will play super high fives. When he's not going well, very unlikely to play in those pools. More interested in exacta, trying to get back on the good foot, see the ball go through the hoop. That's an expression I've heard you use in the past, Jonathan, that I think can apply. I think. Do you think there's a tournament application for that as well? I mean, how would you simplify? Would it be a question of maybe not playing multiple entries, playing one entry and focusing on it, not multi-tabling, just picking the tournament that was the most important to you and going with that? Are there any other ways one could look to simplify as a tournament player?
Yeah, no, I think playing in head-to-heads, I think a lot of times we will play in these events, you got to be in the top 10%. So you'll be in a tournament with 27 people and you got to be in the top 3 to get anything out of it, which can sometimes be a challenge when if you don't have the 8-to-1 shot, there's pretty much no shot of being in that top 3. So that can be kind of frustrating, banging your head against that wall. What I like to do, we've talked about it plenty of times, is playing in a lot of head-to-heads and then playing in the feeders as well to kind of cross out when the feeders don't go so well, there's a pretty good chance that you can be better than one other person on the day, regardless of that 8-1 shot, whether he comes in or not. I can't tell you how many times I play in head-to-heads and 20-1s, 30-1s, 8-1s, 7-1s, 5-2s win, and they don't have them. And so that can be really good for kind of getting your groove back, getting a good idea of what you're looking for, what you're trying to identify, and then transferring that over into a Saturday and a Sunday. The only tricky part is that when you do that, which I would imagine Mike would say is the same in the exacta, is you hyper-focus on what works well in that pool or in that tournament type. And then when you go to a different tournament type and or a different pool, you have to realize that there's some different principles you have to put into play. Don't pretend you're playing in a head-to-head when you're playing in a 200-person top 10% qualifier on a Saturday. It's different. Same with the exacta and the try.
I think there's a good analogy from sports, and it's one I think I've heard Mike use because he was a baseball player for a long time. And it's the difference between just focusing on, maybe if you believe in choking up on the bat a little bit, concentrating on hitting the ball back through the middle as opposed to swinging for the fences. Those are the kind of things that I think can really help you reset. And the thing that unites the multi-race play and the tournament play, you nailed it, JK. It all goes down to level of difficulty. When you have to be better than one person, or when you have to be one of 10 people, that's an extremely different deal than one of 23, or in some of these tournaments, one of 65 that you might see out there. So paying attention to the level of difficulty and not treating it like it's all the same, because it's not. And the more you can tailor your contest play and or your cash play to the task at hand and the specific level of difficulty involved, and by extension, tailoring which of those pools you choose to play into your betting personality, the better off you're going to be. There are some people out there, they're rare, but I think of somebody like Paul Matisse, who's sort of famous for being able to miss 20 bets in a row and bet the 21st just as hard as he did the first. If you have that personality, that's going to allow you to be in a lot more high-risk, high-reward situations than a wimp like me, who'd ideally like to avoid having an 8-race losing streak even. For me, going to be talking about not as many superfectas and pick fours and a lot more exactas and doubles. You gotta tailor it to your own needs, and you'll be a better player for it. Here's another question I want to get to, and then we'll talk a little more general tourneys as well about what's going on the DRF tournament site. Do you scale back in bankroll in the weeks leading up to racing's biggest days, the Derby, Breeders' Cup, Travers, etc.? Or do you play them all equally? I usually scale back and build my bankroll, try to give myself some time to clear my head before the big days, but wondering if I should be prepping and grinding away leading up to major weekends. Really good and thoughtful question. That one comes from our friend Tim Day. What do you think of that, JK?
Yeah, I get that idea. I typically will as a fan, I get sucked into playing big days with horses I love and opinions that I feel are strong, and those usually happen on big days. So, after Keeneland's over, I think there's like a week in between before Churchill starts. I'm a sucker usually for Churchill opening night under the lights. I'll just play a pick 5 because I'm excited about Derby being the next week, but I'm not assaulting the entire day. The way the racing calendar works out, it kind of allows me to kind of grab a little bit before Derby. But there's nothing wrong with building a bankroll before Derby to make your Derby experience a little bit better. But there's nothing wrong with kind of preserving your bankroll. There's nothing worse than running out of money, but there's nothing better than making more before. So it's whatever your appetite can handle, and whatever your betting personality allows. But for me, the calendar is usually kind of helps me lead into it. The 2 weeks before Breeders' Cup, I don't have the pull to participate as much. So it just kind of works itself out for me.
I think you use the key phrase, JK, betting personality. But for me, the advice I'd give is I would ideally be paying attention in the days leading up to a big day. But I think for me, I wouldn't be betting as much, generally speaking. And I don't think it even matters whether you're coming at this from a fan point of view or a gambling point of view. We've seen the way racing is going, the sort of Saturday-centric business model that racing has. you can sort of take advantage of that as a fan and allocate more of your money. From a just an entertainment point of view, those are going to be the best races. But also, these big days from a gambling point of view, I mean, JK, you had just written a chapter in the Steve Davidowitz book about cashing big on racing's biggest days. The opportunities are there as well. So I do think it makes sense to allocate more of your bankroll for those days in the modern world. That's my 2 cents. But it's great. Sometimes if you're paying attention in the days leading up to the big day, you notice that trainer who's cycling up, that jockey who's riding really well and understanding the racetrack, or conversely, notice a rider who's in a funk or a barn that can't seem to get out of its own way for whatever reason. And those little bits of info you gain in maybe the weekend before and the days leading up can help you pay dividends on the big day. But it really just depends on your approach to handicapping, and as JK said, betting personality being the key phrase. I noticed a new contest on DRF tournaments that went live yesterday, JK. Why don't you tell folks about it?
Yeah, I'm fired up about that. I wanted to participate last year. I think last year was the first year for the Belmont Betting Challenge. I think that's what they call it. Where,
yes.
It's obviously it's on the big day, which has turned out to rival Derby Day and Breeders' Cup Day with the Met Mile and I believe it's the Just the Game.
Yeah, Just the Game's that day, absolutely.
The race, the Philly race, I'm going to go blank now on it. Help me out, Pete.
Acorn?
The Acorn, but what about the Philly and Mirror race? The one that we wanted to see Beholder in, where she ripped off half of her foot? Am I going? Are you with me?
I'm with you, but then I was going to say the equivalent one from the Travers undercard. I was going to say Boston Spa, but that's obviously not it.
Anyways, you guys you're picking up what I'm putting down. It's a great day of racing. The Woody Stevens is also that day, so I want to be there for that event to participate. I'm not 100% sure. They haven't posted what's going to happen for this round 2, but the round 1 there's one on Saturday, I believe, or maybe next week, but it's $10 to get started into that event. So I'm looking forward to that. I want to try to qualify for that, and it's another great addition to the already good slate of events that I would encourage people to participate in.
It's always fun to work with our friends at NYRA, and this should be an excellent opportunity. And boy, if we could get somebody who starts for $10 in one of these feeder / round 1 events and ends up cashing for $50,000 or whatever it could possibly be on the big day, on Belmont Stakes Day, that would be a great story. Last year's winner was friend of the podcast, Garrett Skiba. Garrett, hello if you're listening. And always an entertaining guest. Should be a great contest, and very cool that we're working with them. Obviously, as time goes on, we're going to be having some proper qualifiers as well, I'm presuming at different price points. Keep your eyes on tournaments.drf.com. One more note about DRF tournaments before we start doing a little bit of handicapping on today's show. Just want to mention that the Triple Play event wraps up this weekend. We've got a round 1 event on Saturday. Folks can put up $110, and then the top 10% of players will advance to the finals on Sunday, Easter Sunday. You can also just buy in for $1,000 and compete in that round 2 event that will get you seats to not only Keeneland, but also Monmouth and the Santa Anita Preakness contest. So we're talking about a $10,500 value. You can get in either for $110 in the round 1, $1,000 if you go right in the round 2, the finals, or you can even feed in. If you're listening and want to try to feed in today, you'd even have that opportunity. JK, you're sitting on a pretty good hand when it comes to these finals for the Triple Play event. You have 2 entries of the maximum 3 allowed, is that right?
I do. I have 2. I love the ratio, 1 in 12 versus some other situations that are like 1 in 65, which is a close your eyes and pray situation. 1 in 12, I feel like you have a real shot to do well. Senseless horses typically don't affect you in 1 in 12 situations. When you're in 1 in 65 situations, somebody's got the senseless horse. There's some guy who just is like, whatever, and so, and those smaller ratios I prefer. I feel like it's more of a handicapping contest, and you can really pick winners. You can pick a 5-2, you can pick a 6-5 in one of those situations and feel like you're not giving yourself an unfair advantage.
Yeah, it's a very cool thing for a certain type of horse player. For a player more oriented towards picking winners, not that you're against playing long shots. You certainly pick plenty of them, but the ability to have to finish ahead of 11 other people. Again, we were just talking about the whole degree of difficulty concept. It's a situation I'd want to be putting myself in. I'd much rather have to be in the top 10% 2 or 3 times than have to be in that top 1% once. So hopefully we'll get an opportunity to qualify a few more people. Definitely we'll have the opportunity. Maybe I'll even get a chance to write about them next week. I assume you'll be going hard to try to get your third spot?
Yes, I actually have. I think I was looking yesterday. I think I do. I have 3 entries for $110 entries for the third spot. I qualified those in. So, yeah, I'll be swinging for the fences to get that third spot, and hopefully I can pull it off.
I like it. What is your strategy when it comes to 3 entries in a contest as opposed to 2? How does that change things for you?
I'll actually tell you right now, not to give away what we're going to end up leading to, but like the first race on Saturday is Keeneland 7th. It's the Ben Ali, and I picked the same horse on all 3 entries. The third race of the tournament is the Giants Causeway. I picked the same horse on all 3 entries. And then what I'll typically do is and then I'll just kind of randomize it as it goes if I need to. I mean, I'll pick the same horse that can be 6 to 5 on every entry. I do not care because I want position later where I don't have a strong opinion to be able to pick 3 horses like in the Arkansas Derby. I want to be in a position where I have 3 entries that are in contention so that I can pick 3 horses in the Arkansas Derby and then I can hopefully still get to a place of contention for the last couple of races for the tournament. So, it doesn't do me any good early if I think that a 4 to 5 shot's going to win to pick a 4 to 5 shot on one, pick 20 to 1 and 20 to 1, and hope one of the 20 to 1s wins. And if they do, then I still get to the Arkansas Derby where I think 3 horses can win and I have to make a choice. I just rather would go with what I think is going to happen, advance, move on, and then get everyone into position where I can move. I use them like bullets, not so much like chances.
Interesting.
I use them in an attacking way rather than in a defensive way. I've tried it both ways, and the defensive way just doesn't work for me. You just end up zigzagging all over the place and hoping for crazy things to happen. I just prefer go with what I think is going to happen, and if I'm having a day where I'm right, now I have options and I can. It's more of a strategic play for me.
I get it. I get the situations in which you're using all 3 on one, and I get the situations where you're using 3 different horses. Are there ever opportunities where you use 2 bullets, 2 tickets, you play the same horse, and a third ticket the other, or is it for you it's always either going to be 3 horses or 1 horse?
No, I do that as well. In Oaklawn Park 7th, the Count Fleet Sprint. I mean, I don't even. There's no suspense here. I'm going to use Whitmore on my first and second entry, and then I'm going to use Mo Candy on my third entry. I might change that up as we go along, and there might be some different prices that kind of grab my attention. Pete, you know how it is being friendly with as many people as we are in this industry. If I hear Jack Van Berg loves Chief of Staff and he's 20 to 1, I might use him on my third entry. A couple of weeks ago, in the Turfway, when the Turfway was running their big day, that Mike Maker horse that I used that got me a triple play seat, I used him on my third entry because I heard Maker really liked the horse.
Fast and accurate, you're referring to in the spiral stakes.
I did not like that horse. It had nothing to do with me. I picked. I thought the 9 horse in the race. I can't remember the name of the horse, but I thought the 9 horse was going to win. It's one word. I can't. Anyways, I used him on 2, and then I used Fast and Accurate on the other. So I'll use I just kind of pick and choose. The day determines how I'm going to play them, but there definitely is a strategy going into it.
Downside of today's podcast being a road game for me is normally I have my multiple computers set up so I can do things like discover the name of the race we both spaced on before and find out who the 9 horse was in the spiral stakes while I'm talking. But if I do that now, I as we heard a little bit earlier in the show, thunder my fingers on the keys and hurt everybody's ears, especially those listening on headphones. So I'm not going to do that to you, but unfortunately we're not going to have quite the full level of information that we usually do. I think that's a perfect segue to talking about this race 7 at Oaklawn on Saturday. We're going to talk about the 3 graded stakes that I'll be fortunate enough to be in attendance for. The first one is the Count Fleet. It looked to me like a benefit for our old friend Whitmore, who's back now doing what I feel like he really wants to do. And if I were in a contest, I'd be tempted to use him on all three if I were playing 3 entries. JK, do you see any holes in him that you're not willing to fully commit, or is there another reason why you're spreading the love around a little bit?
No, I think that, when there's a closer, a horse that's going to come from off of it, things can happen, right? Weird things can happen. He can miss the break. He can get into traffic trouble. They could go slow in front of him. It doesn't feel like that's going to happen. But he's 4-5, and if my second likely winner in the race, Mo Candy, creeps up to 4-1 or whatever, I surely don't want to miss that opportunity. The other great part of doing that is if Whitmore wins at 4-5, Mo Candy runs second, all 3 tickets still pick up some money. Obviously, the Whitmores will pick up a little bit more, but the difference isn't that significant. So that's kind of how I look at that. And Mo Candy just seems they try to stretch the horse out early in his career. Then they realize that, I think he's going to be an exceptional sprinter. If you look at some of the family of that horse, Silver Assault won on debut in California for Hollendorf and going 5. Valiant Minister ran that gaudy triple-digit buyer for Baffert first out. If I was looking for a sprinter, I would call up the owners of Spooky Minister and see if they'd let me breed to her.
Now, one of the negative angles for me typically is horses coming off of perfect trips who didn't win. That was one reason I was maybe a little skeptical about Mo Candy. And then the other reason was one of my pet angles we've talked about on this show. It's nearly cost me, but I still feel like I'm on the right side of it. Fading Sadler on the road. Those things, neither of those things gives you any pause about him. If I were looking for another horse, I might be angling towards who might be the best of the speeds in Holy Boss or someone like that. But you have at least a little bit of faith in Mo Candy.
Yeah, the Sadler the Sadler thing is a big problem. However, I didn't think he had a really good trip last time.
Oh, really? Did I miss something there?
You talking about the Palos Verdes? I thought he was
correct.
Wide the entire time. I thought it was actually kind of a poor ride.
Interesting. Did you have it as a good inside day?
No, it was just, it's Santa Anita, so it's kind of always kind of good inside, but I think going 6 at Santa Anita, the last place you want to be is 4 wide
fair.
On the turn.
That's fair.
So I didn't think it was an ideal, but in your defense, the Sadler jinx probably carries more weight to me than that. And that's why I'm fine taking 4-5 on a horse like Whitmore. I just couldn't really find anything else I wanted. Whitmore's last 2 races, when your last 2 crush anything that any horse in the field has done in their life, that's like a 4-5 check, move on for me. That's how I look at it.
All right. Well, I defer to you on all trip notes regarding Southern California. I haven't been playing it a lot of going off a quick impression there. The Sadler jinx thing probably also had me trying to think of negative things to say about the horse. So you don't have to take me too literally on that one, that's for sure. Let's move on to race 9. It's the Oaklawn Handicap. I don't know, man. I mean, are we really just talking about who's going to run second to Midnight Storm here? Is this Midnight Storm on all 3 entries based on the fact that he leaps off the page, having the best numbers as well as a pace advantage?
I was like, ooh, I'm gonna beat him. We're gonna beat Midnight Storm here. I'm going through it. I'm looking through it. I'm like, okay, all right. Made from Lucky. Okay, maybe Made from Lucky. Yeah, Javier, okay, cool. Midnight Storm, I thought he should have went on with it a little bit more last time. Maybe the jock will make that same mistake again. Oh, it's Mike Smith. Okay, Midnight Storm, move on. Yeah, of all the riders in America, Mike's not the one who's going to ever be accused of walking the dog on the front end. He was the one who got Game On Dude to figure it out, and I think he'll do the same thing here. I think he'll go on with it. And I think it'll be pretty simple here from here. I wouldn't actually. I would criticize anyone who tried to find someone else in here that they wanted.
I love it. Everybody says that when there's 4 to 5 shots. It's like, well, I wouldn't blame anybody for taking a chance against them. JK would. He would blame you for taking a shot against him.
Yeah, I think people are going to want to play Villafranco. Probably. I mean, I think he seems like an interesting alternative, but I'll pass on that. Villafranco has not been going very well as of late. You can search around Twitter for some.
I thought that had reversed itself a little bit. I thought he had started to reheat up again.
I think he'd won some races leading up to it. One of the things that Marshall had pointed out to me that was really interesting, sitting with him, being an owner at Oaklawn, was a lot of guys will start. And this does not apply to Domain's Rat, but a lot of guys will aggressively drop Arkansas breds because they can't do anything with them until Oaklawn starts up again. So they'll drop them late, pick up the person, lose the horse because what are they going to go put them put a 10 claimer on the farm for an entire year? And I think a lot of guys probably picked up wins in that scenario.
I also want to follow up about I just Midnight Storm. I mean, I really think he was ridden that way last time for fears about the 1.25 miles more than the fact that it was too conservative. I think a jockey has to keep that in mind when stamina is a question, and obviously not having to deal with as much ground today, I think just naturally would put him in a better position. And then I guess Mike Smith just sweetens the picture that much more. Does that sound fair to you?
Yeah, no, I mean, last time he was on him, he won by 6. So obviously it was a different scenario, but I just think that, that's what Mike does. That's what we talk about all the time. We actually got into a debate the other day with our friend Chris Pipito, the jockey's agent for
Pipes,
I know, but just in case the listeners didn't know, about what's the difference between the guys in the room, in the jocks room. Is there a difference, or is anybody going to win on any horse in any day? And I think we've talked about it enough that my take on it is that the good guys are going to win on good horses at the same rate. The difference between the great ones is they win races that a lot of other guys would have screwed up. And that's how I think Mike is. Anyway, and I raised the question, and I don't know the answer, but does jockey C or D do what Mike did on Arrogant, and does he win anyways? It's probably a bad example because the horse is a freak, but Mike didn't panic, and I think that's what happens a lot of times with some of these jocks is they just prevent the bad thing from happening, not so much that they pick these horses up and carry them across the wire.
That's an interesting point about that. It's what is the old expression? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's like you don't know a lot of what a great rider is going to do. It's not necessarily that there's some flashy thing they're doing that no other rider could do. It's having this like sixth sense of being able to prevent the trouble from happening before it does. I'd buy that. And as you know, I look at jockeys a lot more in my handicapping than a lot of other horse players do. And it's not, this is my pet jockey, I'm going to upgrade that horse a length. It's this jockey is really suited to this task. Or this track is a little bit biased today, and I know Corey Lannery rides this track really well when it's biased, and upgrading a little bit from that point of view. And the book on Mike Smith is pretty simple. Best money rider going, and you put him in a situation he could basically do it all within those parameters. And sometimes, and you're probably right, the Arrogant example, because he's such a freak, it's hard to say, but in another sense, I still think it was one of the best rides I've ever seen, because it would have been so easy. It would have been so easy to panic. And then you just don't know. I mean, when horses distribute their energy in a completely wrong way, you can get a radically different result than what you see on the racetrack. And to be as calm and cool and collected as he was, it was a thing of beauty. I mean, it's a ride I'll remember and a race I'll remember for the rest of my life. So,
I will say, if I was riding Arrogant that day as the guy who's only been on a horse in Puerto Vallarta with my mom when I was 12.
Poor Arrogant. I don't think he'd let you on, personally.
My thought would have been, oh my gosh, I missed the break. I'm going to have to be much the best. Let me drop to the rail and save as much ground as possible and then tip out and win $10 million. That's what I would have tried to do. And that's why I'm not a jock, because I would have got, that big, long striding horse. I would have got stuck in behind horses and been in trouble. Mike stayed 3-4 wide on both turns and still was the best without even having to use the stick. So there's a jockey in this world that would have went to the rail, tucked in, and saved ground, and that horse could have potentially gotten beat.
Or just completely, you see some jockeys when they get left, they just rush right up, and they end up going, when you cut out quarters too early in a race that are faster than the horse wants to run. It's just like if, I could do a certain jog every day and do my, whatever. 10-minute is probably giving myself too much credit at this point. But if you're used to, running 10s and you can run 6 miles or whatever, that's fine. Run the first one in 8 and then see how you feel by mile 5. That happens on the racetrack to horses all the time, and jockeys can be partially responsible for that when they get too aggressive early after a horse gets left. That, to me, was the perfect blend between patient and aggressive. It was just, again, a thing of absolute beauty. Before we leave the Oaklawn handicap, apologies if you did this before. I don't think you did, though. Who's running second? Did we hit that note yet?
I mean, I guess Made from Lucky. He's got, he's second off of a break, ran pretty well in the last race. He was wide all the way around there. I mean, I guess.
Who ran better between him and Domain Rap last time? It's one of those I could kind of argue it either way.
Yeah, I mean, they were both wide. I would say Made from Lucky because I probably ran the better race. And the reason I say that is because Domain's Rap was the 4th race in a cycle. So you feel like that was kind of his best effort. And this is going to be second off of a break for Todd. So I guess I didn't really answer your question.
It's a hard question because you also have that matter of like closing on kind of a modest pace versus having to do the dirty work and maybe being a little bit closer early. That was not a question that I had an answer to. I was really curious. But then also form cycle is always a really good way to look at that. And of course, once again, form cycle, not a one-size-fits-all thing. There are trainers whose horses are going to get better second off the layoff and third off the layoff. There are trainers whose horses are going to do better right off the bench. So you have to look at all those things and try to piece together the equation. But it sounds like if you were to be giving out a straight exacta in that race, you would be looking at Made from Lucky in second place, Midnight Storm, of course, in first. That's enough time on the Oaklawn handicap. Let's move it along to the Arkansas Derby. I mentioned before, I think this is a really interesting race from a betting point of view. My gut here is to take 2 separate approaches from a betting point of view. I have a long shot I may be trying to mess around with underneath, and with that horse, I will probably be looking for lots of logicals in the top spots. But I think my main opinion in the race, in the picks, is can we just beat these 2 favorites? They're favorites for a reason. They deserve to be. But I think there are enough questions surrounding them that I was going to try to make a case for a stranger, and I was thinking the right stranger here might be Conquest Mo Money coming out of Sunland. He's got to prove he can take his act on the road. That can be tricky, but I just thought watching the tape of the race, it looked like a case of a horse maybe moving a little too soon in a pace that was fast early. Obviously, E-Rap came back, flattered the form of that race tremendously. I'm not sure how good the other horses coming out of the Rebel are. Just seemed like a chance to maybe take a shot with one at a big price. Do you think I'm nuts, or will this horse maybe be on one of your 3 contest entries?
Oh, I mean, I think you're nuts, but with love. No, I mean, looking at this race, one of the things that one of the main points is the Malagasi's draw is interesting, right? I mean, it's a Todd horse, so I don't care if you look at the running lines or not. He's going to be first, second, or third early. Conquest Mo Money, although was 7th early in Sunland, if you look down through the PPs, the horse has speed. Time Form has his last 2 early fractions is red, which we've talked about, indicates that pace was faster than the par for that distance in that course. They've drawn the 11 and the 12. They're both going to go on with it. I feel like there's a big field. I feel like the pace is going to be quick, similar to how we looked at Gunnevera a couple weeks ago. I don't see a trip in which Malagasy wins this race. He's going to be hard used to get to that 2-path stalking trip. And in that situation, I just would rather have someone else than him at a short price. I really,
you don't think he makes the top?
Who, Malagasy?
Yeah. I figured you just send from out there.
Yeah, I hope he does, because if he makes the top, then it's going to set it up for the other horses that I like. And if he doesn't make the top, he's got no shot. And if he makes the top, he's got no shot. So I just don't see how he wins. I don't see how he wins. Now, that obviously takes us to the most important piece of this puzzle, which is, what do you feel about Classic Empire? And I think that I'm a fan of Norm Cassie. I'm a fan of Travis Stone. I know that this is the most talented horse that we have left in the crop. However, there's been way too many things go wrong. And in my opinion, they're no fault of the trainer. I mean, the horse got an abscess in his foot last time, which is a problem. They obviously didn't have him cranked for that race anyways. Then the horse started. He's been a nut job from day one. And they've done a lot, in my opinion, to get him to win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile as such a crazy horse. And now he's up against it in terms of training. And people are going to say, well, he's worked those 259s at the farm, and that's great. And he's going to range up and look like he might be a winner. And then I feel like it's going to just, all of these adverse situations are going to catch up to him. I hope more than any horse in this field that he wins by 7 and he goes on to the Derby, and then and then we can decide what we want to do with him there. But I can't use him here. However, I cannot. I'll tell you that I'm struggling between Petrov and Sonneteer on who I want to pick. The problems I have with them are this. Sonneteer, where the hell did that performance come from last time, right? It was a really good one. He ran really well. He galloped out well. And I kind of trust DeSormo. I love the fact that it's a Calumet-bred horse with a lot of kind of bottom in that breeding. The extra ground should fit. But where did that performance come from? And that worries me a little bit, because it was a huge jump up in figures. It was a huge jump up in outcome, and that worries me. Petrov feels like the type that wants to go a little bit longer. All 3 of his races, he's just kind of always in position, and then so I'm hoping that he'll take back a little bit here. They're going to go a little bit longer. He'll be asked for less run early, and he'll finish up. I love the idea that he's getting a trainer. I mean, I'm sorry, not a trainer, but a jockey switch. So hopefully we'll see something different from him. I am not going to fall for looking at Lee. That looks like Creator, but it's not Creator. Creator ran much faster than this in his previous start than looking at Lee did. So I think a lot of people are going to get stuck for that. He's going to be 6-1 in tournaments looking at Lee. You've heard it here first.
Yeah, you're probably right. I just can't have the way that the impression looking at Lee on paper a lot more than on the tape. On the tape, I feel like he ranges up and looks like he's going to make this run and just finds nothing. And it doesn't come back fast. So I'm with you being anti there. I like your case on Petrov to maybe be in the mix at a good price. I wrote nice things about him in the super look that I wrote. The other horse I thought you were going to laugh at me about was Sonneteer, who I think is more of an underneath. I don't know if he's good enough to win it. You ask about where the last race came from. My only 2 comments there would be, 3-year-olds this time of year, you see things like that. I feel like every year somebody emerges. This is sort of the perfect year, especially, and maybe the perfect field, given the questions surrounding the favorites, for a horse to sort of come out of nowhere and continue to improve. And I feel like that's also not, and I wish I had done this digging for my super look. I'd like to see if there's a stat to back this up. But I get the impression Keith DeSormo is one of these trainers whose horses can have these kind of patterns where they sort of slowly improve and then get good and stay good. That seems to me to be something that we might be able to see from him. He wouldn't be the first maiden to make an impact on this year's Kentucky Derby Trail. I'd be all about him underneath. And gosh, that's a tough call in tournaments if it'd be worth a bullet for him on top. But at the price he's going to be, and if you think the tournament players are going to avoid him like the plague in favor of something a little more fashionable like looking at Lee, you wouldn't have to twist my arm to get me to include Sonneteer. But let's get back to the question I asked you at first. You seem to be so uninterested in Conquest Mo Money that you couldn't even spend a breath dismissing his chances. Why can't I be right about this horse as the stranger in this group?
It's just a post for me. I feel like he's either going to get hung out too wide, or he's going to go too fast. Like, I don't see a scenario in which he clears, gets to the inside, and is in a comfortable position going a mile and an eighth against this caliber of horse. I don't see a situation where he rates and is good enough going 3 or 4 wide to beat this caliber of horse going a mile and an eighth in this situation. So I can't pick a way for him to win the race when you're designing it, at least when I'm designing it. Maybe someone else can design it differently, but when I'm designing it, I don't see how it happens.
It's going to take a lot of work, and I will also, to be 100% honest, and I'm so glad you mentioned that. I started handicapping this race before they were drawn, knowing I was going to do that super look, and I knew he was probable. So I sort of got a lot of positive ideas in my head about him before the draw even. So that
happens to me every year during Breeders' Cup when they have the pre-entries and all that stuff, and you're like, ooh, there's a lot of speed in here, and then like 3 of the speed horses don't get in, and then it's like, oh, but I fell in love with this closer, and I get it.
It can be a dangerous game, but I like a lot of the ones you're thinking about there. You've sounded great all show, by the way, and you just got a little muddy in the last 12 seconds. I don't know if there's anything that changed audio wise, or if you just jinxed us when you told me you thought everything sounded good in that text a minute ago.
No, I think I got comfortable when I put my hand over my mouth like this. Is that what?
Yeah, it's still sounding bad. I mean, not bad, but mediocre. It's not the crystal clear.
I jinxed this.
We'll just rock and roll. Let's move on to Keeneland. We only have 13 minutes left in the show. I want to talk about these 4 races. We do not have to blast through this. That should be actually plenty of time to go through at a normal pace. And then if we have a little bit of time, maybe we'll go back for a couple more specific thoughts about exactly how we might bet the Arkansas Derby. But let's talk about Keeneland. All stakes pick 4. It starts with the Ben Ali. Your boy, Conquest Enforcer. Rumors I'm hearing make it sound like he's going to go here as opposed to is it the Maker's Mark he's cross-entered in? Are you hearing, I know you know these connections a little bit, are you hearing anything about which spot this horse is going to ultimately end up in? Because it absolutely changes who I'm going to pick in the race if Conquest Enforcer's in it as opposed to not in it.
Wow, I'm not hearing. I just assumed that they were going to run him today in the Maker's Mile. That was my thought. I mean, I didn't talk to him. I know they do want to get a dirt. They ultimately think he's going to be a good dirt horse, and they want to get a dirt start into him, a graded dirt start into him. I just didn't think it was going to be tomorrow. If it is, that will impact me a little bit. I picked doing the out of the gate thing the videos that we do every week. If you haven't seen it yet, it's pretty fun little deal with Matt and Mike and Dan, and I usually give a multi-race play, and I did the pick 4, and I single Birdsong in here with just a single A, no B's.
You're going to want to revisit that because Conquest Enforcer scratched. I just checked. So he's going to be in here. I would assume if he's in here, I have to assume he's hell-bent for leather on the lead. And that was exactly the point I was going to make. I would have been all about Birdsong had he scratched. But with the 2 of them in there, I don't know. It just makes me look a lot harder at a horse who I wouldn't have thought had a chance with no Conquest Enforcer in last year's winner and the Keeneland horse for course Eagle. I wonder, if those 2 really go at it, and I think there's a world in which they do, perhaps that brings him into the picture. Might be hard to get all the way up for the win, but certainly a horse to be looking at 1, 2, 3 in verticals. I know you handicapped the race another way, but just thinking about it on the fly, do you think that Birdsong can win the race even with Conquest Enforcer in there, or would you want to go another way?
Absolutely. I don't think Birdsong has to have the lead, and I wish that Birdsong was drawn outside, but if Enforcer's hell-bent, Enforcer's going to go on with it, and then Birdsong will sit outside. So I've always loved Enforcer. I've always thought he's a great horse, and so that would definitely change the way I view this race. When we go through the rest of the pick 4, you'll find out that I have some other singles. All I would probably do is add Enforcer on as an A here and just use 2 A's and forget about the B situation. I get it. People are going to be drawn into Scuba and Eagle closing into what appears to be a fast pace. I still think those 2 horses are a standout regardless. I think they're both great. I'd single either one of them without each other. I do get the argument that the pace should now cook up, but I'm fine either way.
You're going to stick with the speed and hope for the best, it sounds like. And yeah, I'm with you about the difficulty of betting closers. It's always, especially obviously in horizontals, can be a little tricky because they're so at the mercy of other things that they can't necessarily control. So that's why for me, Eagle there would be more of a vertical play than a horizontal one. And maybe, I don't know, if I forced you to throw a third horse in the mix there besides Birdsong and Eagle from my side of the ticket, who would your third one be? Would you get down with the Scuba Love?
I think it would probably be Fermento.
Yeah, that's logical.
If you look back, the horse added blinkers and didn't run well first off a break, but has run, okay the last two. He's going to come from way out of it. Zito enjoys winning at Keeneland. I think I would maybe look at him. I'm a little bit fed up with Eagle. I think Eagle's going to be a little bit overbet in this spot. If you look back to 2016, Eagle ran in the New Orleans handicap and then came back and won the Ben Ali. However, I think it was different because he ran a lot faster, in my opinion, in the New Orleans handicap leading into this race last year. He's frustrated me a few too many times. So
I hear you. He's not a horse I'm super excited about, especially again horizontally as the favorite, which he's actually the morning line favorite. I wonder though if there's not a world in which he could maybe sneak off at a little better price than the shortness of the morning line. It all remains to be seen.
Doesn't Scuba want to go around twice? So I don't think. I think he wants longer. So.
Well, all right. There's some thoughts for the Ben Ali and getting this pick 4 kicked off. From there, we're going to go to the return to the races of Lady Aurelia. I did not do the deep dive on this race, but I can tell you this straight off the bat. She'd be in at least 50%, I think, of my horizontal tickets going forward, if not more. Would appear to have a pace advantage, has really shaped like something special on the racetrack in her starts. What do you got here? What did you give out on the TV show?
So you're telling me you need Wesley Ward to get a horse ready to go less than 6 furlongs at Keeneland?
He's been known to do that once or twice, hasn't he?
Yeah, just go to YouTube if you were under a rock somehow and didn't watch the race. I can't remember if it was before or after Tepin won at Royal Ascot, and watch her race there. She's a freak. And I think she's going to have an unbelievable year turf sprinting. They'll probably try to do some other stuff with her. She's working well from what I've heard, and I think there's no problems. What she did as a 2-year-old, if you look at time form, that's one of the things about time form. You can see the time form figure for her at Royal Ascot, and that figure as a 2-year-old fits with all of these. If she improves a little bit just on her age jump, it should be easy sailing for her.
Now, it is possible, JK, I don't know how Timeform US does this, but the UK Timeform projects that improvement into the numbers. So it is possible that's why that edge is as large as it seems. That's one we'll have to ask Craig Milkowski. Maybe we'll send him a tweet after the show and ask him if that number has weight for age built in. For some strange reason, in the UK way of doing form figures, they add extra credit for that. It kind of makes me crazy. I wish you could just strip that out and we could make those assessments by hand.
If you wanted to go back to her debut in America, she ran a 109. If you look at the kind of the preview of this race, it's going to take about a 115 to win. So that's good enough. And that was on the dirt, and she's better on the turf. So
there you go. Great point.
Works for me.
So we're both sort of in agreement there. Let's go on to the 9th race at Keeneland. It's the Lexington. It's a theoretical prep for the Kentucky Derby, though none of these horses will be competing in the Kentucky Derby. We have our old buddy No Dozing making his return to the races. We have West Coast from Bob Baffert here. It just seemed to me like a race where you could maybe also try to get a little bit clever. Again, maybe more in verticals than in horizontals. And I was going to see if we could maybe get looking at Blessing up into the number, coming out of that Always Dreaming race and showing a pretty nice closing kick in there. Obviously, as with Always Dreaming, They went so comically slow early. The final figure isn't much, but I was wondering if that didn't mean maybe we could get some value. You mentioned Zito targeting Keeneland. Why can't this horse run second, third, or fourth to some of the logicals in here and maybe a penny to win? Do you have any use for? I mean, I'm guessing I probably wouldn't use the horse in tournaments, so I'm guessing you wouldn't be thinking tourneys either. But what did you think of that thought?
I admittedly completely faded the horse based on the last race, or the last three races. I just wasn't that impressed. However, you bring up a great point about the turn of foot. That figure, just like we learned with Always Dreaming, was low because they went so slow. So I'm glad I listened to the podcast today to pick up on that. On my initial ticket, I didn't give that horse even a B call out, I don't believe.
Yeah, I don't know that I would for horizontals either, to be honest. The horse just looks too slow compared to some of these. But for the vertical players, it's just one that I wanted to shine a little bit of a spotlight on.
I mean, I kind of want to bang my head against the wall again and pick No Dozing. But here's the thing, is I think people were betting no – I'm trying to, justify my bad betting. I think a lot of other people were betting No Dozing based on the Remsen run, the wide trip, all
incident
of that.
Incident in the first turn. There was something weird happened in that race early that got a lot of trip-oriented people looking at that horse for sure.
I'm betting the horse. It had been betting the horse and losing my money on the horse from the Breeders' Futurity where he ran fourth to Classic Empire. It doesn't matter what you're betting on. The horse hasn't picked up his feet in those two regards in his last two starts. The fact that they're kind of going on with him again is a little bit of a encouraging step. It just depends on the price for me, tournament-wise. Luckily, the tournaments I'll be playing on Saturday will be live, so I can make a decision. I don't have to make that decision early. I will also be using Convict Pike, adding blinkers, trying dirt in this spot. Ran on the dirt once at Churchill, at Ellis Park and Churchill. The two-turn race at Churchill was in the mud, so I can kind of forgive for that. I know the horse is training well. Angel Cruz and our boy Pipes can pull up a little bit of magic at Keeneland.
It's happened before.
I use 6 horses as A horses in this spot, so I really don't have a strong opinion. I'd hate to lie and say I do. I'm going to try to get No Dozing to run back to that Keeneland trip that he ran at 4 starts ago.
Just for fun, run through the rest of your A's here.
Oh, geez, I think I just deleted it. When your desktop is dirty, you don't handicap well. That's another thing I should tell Gilbert. Clean your desktop off. I did that before the show. I think I'm using resiliency. I think was a B. Super Tap It was an A. I was not using Senior Investment. I was using No Dozing, Time to Travel, Convict Pike as A's, and West Coast as an A. One of those horses is a B. I just can't remember which one it was. But I use West Coast.
You don't love what you Mr. Baffert fan though. You don't love West Coast here. It sounds like obviously, but we've barely mentioned him. I was thinking he looked like maybe one we could take on here from the outside post. I would certainly. I'm not saying I wouldn't use as an A, but it would be more of a defensive A. I just figure he's going to be hammered. We get a better price on No Dozing and Time to Travel as A's, and then I might throw in as a value B or a sneaky A the Convict Pike you mentioned, and then put them all together, trying to get my Zito long shot up in the number and verticals.
Yeah, it's a tricky race. I don't, it's going to be a barn burner.
It should be fun. I mean, it's not going to have an impact on the Kentucky Derby, but that doesn't mean we can't have fun betting on it. I've sort of left not enough time to talk about the Jenny Wiley, very cool race. From a betting point of view, though, I do think we can probably go through it pretty quickly. Lots of old friends in here. Is it the Lady Eli show, JK?
Yeah, I thought it was. I mean, I singled her as a single A there, but the reason I did is because I just thought, why is she still running if she can't still do it? They ran her in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf. She ran big that day. Her value is it's maxed, isn't it? I mean, what more can she do to increase her value as a broodmare? Obviously, they have a tie to her Sheep Pond, and them being her being their first horse, but I just don't see why they would bring her back to the track after all she's gone through if she wasn't ready to rock and roll. From what I understand, she's working well. We'll check out the DRF workout report to confirm that. But, I just used her as a single A, and then I like Time and Motion as the other B.
That's interesting. I'm glad I was going to say you should definitely save at least a little bit with Time and Motion. I mean, I just feel like the Matriarch run had the obvious excuse of having no pace to run at, and she's just so good, and I feel like she's continually underrated. She's got it done as a podcast pick on multiple occasions before, and for me, a little bit different. I wish we had more time. We'd talk about exactly what this means in terms of practical betting. For me, I'd have them as both A's, but I would probably have 4 times as much on the combinations with Lady Eli just to compensate for the fact that she's going to represent so much more of that pick 4 pool. Quick final thought, JK, before we send it home on this Friday afternoon?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't ignore Maker on the grass. I wouldn't do that. So enjoy the weekend, and hopefully everybody has some luck and build that bankroll leading up to the first Saturday in May.
I like it. Kitten's Roar, the horse you're giving a little bit of an endorsement for, maybe for a penny in your verticals and as a must-use in your horizontals. Is that your thought?
Yeah, like I joked the other, you could put me and you in a horse suit and let Maker train us on the grass, and I would bet on us.
A dodgy proposition, but based on the phenomenal successful numbers he's had, nothing would really surprise me at this point. All right, that's it. That's all the time we have. I want to thank Jonathan Kitchen. I want to thank my family for being so quiet, like church mice in the hotel room during this show. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for listening, especially those of you who submitted questions, especially those of you who leave a review on iTunes. Definitely helps other people find the show, and we appreciate it very much. We will be back next week on Tuesday. My name's Peter Thomas Fornatal. May you win all your photos.